The sky over Earth darkened as the massive alien fleet approached. It wasn't like anything humanity had ever seen before. Hundreds of enormous ships, shaped like giant silver crescents, hung in space like silent predators. They had no windows, no signs of life, only cold, unfeeling surfaces that seemed to absorb the light of the sun. The invaders were here. The Xalorians, a race of alien warriors from a distant galaxy, had traveled across the stars to find new worlds to conquer. Earth was their next target. Their leader, Zorak, had laughed when he first saw Earth on his ship's display screen. The planet was so small compared to the mighty worlds he had conquered before. The humans, he thought, would be easy to crush. They were primitive, their technology outdated and weak. The Xalorians had conquered worlds with far stronger defenses than Earth's, and yet this little blue planet, with its armies of men and women, would be no challenge. Zorak's laughter echoed through the command center of the alien fleet. His soldiers, tall and armored, stood around him, waiting for his orders. They, too, were sure this would be a quick victory. But Zorak was not foolish. He knew better than to underestimate any enemy completely. However, his confidence was unshakable. He gave the order to begin the attack. On Earth, the first signs of the invasion were subtle. The skies began to shimmer in places as strange ships cloaked themselves in Earth's atmosphere. At first, no one noticed. Then, the first signs of destruction started. A small city in the northern hemisphere suddenly went dark, its power grid failing. Then, strange lights appeared in the sky. It didn't take long before the news broke. The entire world went into a panic. Governments across the globe tried to respond. Military forces scrambled to organize a defense, but there was no plan for an invasion like this. The Xalorians didn't attack with traditional weapons. Their ships released strange energy blasts that disintegrated everything they touched. Buildings crumbled in seconds, and panic spread across the world. People screamed in the streets as they watched their cities fall. The leaders of Earth's nations gathered in secret. Their meeting rooms were filled with military strategists, scientists, and politicians. The room buzzed with nervous voices as they tried to understand the alien threat. The Xalorians had not even made contact yet. They had just started their attack, and already, humanity's defenses were collapsing. No one knew what to do. The world was unprepared for an enemy like this. As the leaders argued about what to do, a small group of military officers and scientists met in a hidden room beneath a mountain. They had been preparing for something like this for years. They had kept their plans secret, even from the world leaders, knowing that one day, humanity might face an enemy like the Xalorians. This small group had been training Earth's most elite soldiers in secret, preparing them for a war the world didn't know it would have to fight. These soldiers were not ordinary men and women. They were the best of the best, handpicked from every corner of the globe. They were Earth's last hope. But even as the warriors prepared to face the Xalorians, doubts crept in. How could they fight an enemy so powerful? The Xalorian ships were invulnerable to Earth's weapons, and their technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The elite warriors knew they had to act fast, but how could they take down an enemy that seemed unstoppable? The invasion was just beginning, and already Earth's cities were burning. The Xalorians showed no mercy, and they showed no signs of stopping. As their ships hovered over Earth's major cities, they released strange energy beams that caused explosions on the ground below. The world watched in horror as the alien invaders destroyed everything in their path. The warriors, hidden away from the chaos, prepared for their mission. They were armed with advanced weapons, technology developed in secret by Earth's top scientists. But they knew that weapons alone wouldn't be enough to defeat the Xalorians. They had to be quick, smart, and strategic. The soldiers had trained for years for this moment, but now, facing the real thing, they couldn't help but wonder, was it enough? With the alien ships blocking the sky, Earth's elite warriors gathered their courage. The time for waiting was over. As they prepared to launch their first attack, they knew they had one advantage the Xalorians did not expect. the will of humanity to fight back. The warriors couldn't predict how the battle would unfold, but one thing was certain: they wouldn't give up without a fight. But even as they began their mission, something dark loomed on the horizon. The Xalorians were only just beginning their attack. They had barely started, and Earth's fate was already hanging by a thread. Would humanity's best warriors be enough to turn the tide, or was Earth destined to fall? The clock was ticking. Time was running out. The battle for Earth had just begun. The room was silent as the last of the world's leaders and generals gathered in secret. Outside, the skies burned with the fires of alien destruction, but within the hidden facility, a different kind of preparation was underway. A small select group of the world's greatest minds and warriors had been preparing for this day for years, hidden away from the public eye, away from the chaos. They had been called Earth's final hope, but to most, they were a myth. Now, they were humanity's only chance for survival. In a deep underground facility, miles below the surface, Earth's most elite warriors gathered. These were no ordinary soldiers. Each had been chosen for their extraordinary skills honed through years of training that spanned the globe. They were not just the best of the best. They were the absolute peak of human potential, capable of surviving in the most brutal environments, fighting with a precision and power that could rival the most advanced technology. Their leader, Colonel Lucas Riker, stood in front of them. His face was grim, his eyes hard, as he surveyed the warriors who had been assembled. Each one had sacrificed everything for this moment. Their families, their past lives, all of it had been left behind. They were warriors now, and the fate of Earth rested in their hands. "I know what you're thinking," Riker said, his voice calm but full of authority. "You're thinking this is impossible, that the Xalorians are too powerful. But remember this: we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for everything that makes us human. The Xalorians believe they can crush us without a second thought, but they've underestimated something. They've underestimated us." The warriors stood in silence, taking in their leader's words. Riker's confidence was contagious. He had led them through countless simulations, preparing them for the impossible. But this was no simulation. This was real. The invaders were here, and their ships loomed over Earth like a dark shadow, mocking humanity's weakness. The aliens were ruthless, and they had already begun to crush cities under the weight of their technology. Riker motioned toward a large screen at the front of the room, where the faces of Earth's top scientists and military commanders appeared. "We've been working on something for years," he said. "While the rest of the world was unprepared, we've been quietly building weapons and technology that could give us a fighting chance. You won't find these weapons anywhere else. They're our secret advantage." On the screen, a scientist named Dr. Evelyn Carter began to speak. "These weapons are unlike anything the aliens have ever seen. We've designed them to exploit their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. Their ships might be powerful, but we've found a way to break through their defenses. The warriors will need to infiltrate the alien fleets, strike with precision, and disrupt their systems from within. It won't be easy, but it's our best shot." The warriors exchanged looks, their determination growing. They had trained for this, but now, as the reality of their mission set in, the weight of what they had to do became clear. They would not just be fighting for survival, they would be striking back against an invincible enemy. Colonel Riker turned to them. "We'll be the ones to show these aliens what Earth is capable of. We won't wait for them to destroy us. We'll take the fight to them. We're Earth's warriors, and it's time to remind the universe that we're not to be underestimated." The warriors nodded, each one steeling themselves for the battle ahead. They knew the risks. The aliens had technology far beyond anything Earth had, and the warriors would have to fight with every ounce of their strength and intelligence. But they were ready. They had no choice. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would infiltrate the alien ships, using advanced stealth technology to get close. They would disable key systems, strike at the heart of the Xalorian fleet, and create enough chaos to give Earth's defense forces a fighting chance. It was risky, perhaps even impossible, but it was their only option. As the warriors prepared to board their stealth ships, Colonel Riker gave them one last command. Remember why we fight. Not just for our families, not just for our planet, but for the future of humanity. We show them what Earth can do when pushed to the edge. The team boarded their ships, the engines humming as they powered up. The world outside was chaos. Cities burned, and the Exalorian ships continued their relentless assault. But inside their ships, the warriors were focused. This was their moment. As they ascended into the dark sky, the silence in their cockpits was deafening. Each warrior was alone with their thoughts. Some thought of their loved ones, others of the life they had left behind. But all were determined to succeed. They were humanity's last hope, and they would not fail. Above them, the Exalorian fleet loomed like an unstoppable force. But the warriors knew something the aliens didn't. The fight was far from over. The war had just begun, and Earth's warriors were ready to take the first step in striking back. The warriors had no choice but to face the vast, menacing fleet of Exalorian ships. As their stealth vessels emerged from Earth's atmosphere, they marveled at the sheer size of the alien fleet above them. The ships hung in the sky like enormous, floating mountains, sleek, dark, and terrifying. The Exalorians had no need for subtlety. Their ships were symbols of power, and they broadcasted their dominance without hesitation. To the warriors, they appeared as a seemingly unstoppable force. In the cockpit of his ship, Colonel Riker's fingers tightened around the controls. He had been in countless battles, fought on more fronts than most would ever imagine. But this was different. The enemy they were about to face was unlike any he had ever encountered. The Exalorians had no mercy. They didn't understand hesitation or fear. They were built to destroy. And if humanity failed today, there would be no tomorrow. Ready, team? Riker's voice crackled through their communication channels, steady but full of tension. Ready, sir, came the calm responses from each of his warriors. They were prepared, but as their ships closed in on the alien fleet, the weight of the task ahead hit them like a heavy wave. They were about to infiltrate one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, armed with nothing but Earth's best technology and their own wits. As they approached the fleet, the warriors could see the glowing energy shields that surrounded each of the Exalorian ships, a nearly impenetrable defense system. The stealth ships that the warriors piloted were designed to be invisible to the naked eye, but the energy shields of the Exalorian ships were unlike anything Earth had created. These shields could detect and counter even the faintest of energy signatures. The warriors had no illusions about the difficulty of this mission. One wrong move, and they would be detected instantly. Colonel Riker's mind raced as he observed the enemy's movements. We're going in on the outer perimeter first. Stick to the plan, and we'll create the opening we need. The warriors piloted their ships into position, weaving through the debris left in the wake of the Exalorians' earlier destruction. They had to stay hidden, remain as undetected as possible, but the stakes were higher than ever. If they were caught too soon, it would mean the end, not just for them, but for the entire planet. As they neared the first of the Exalorian command ships, the warriors prepared to engage the advanced cloaking technology that Earth scientists had developed. It was the only way they could get close enough to disable the alien ships. The cloaking device activated, and the warriors' ships became nearly invisible to the naked eye. The countdown began in their minds. But even with this advanced technology, they knew the risks. The Exalorian fleet had patrols, watchful eyes that would be searching for any sign of weakness. They had to remain still, silent. The slightest mistake, and their mission would be compromised. They had trained for this. Now it was time to execute. Riker watched as the first few warriors carefully navigated their ships toward a weak spot in the enemy defenses, a small, unnoticed gap in the energy shield surrounding one of the Exalorian command ships. If they could slip through unnoticed, it would give them the opening they needed. 5 seconds, Riker muttered under his breath. His heart raced. They had practiced this maneuver hundreds of times, but this time, there was no margin for error. The warriors held their breath as they approached the shields, their ships barely a whisper against the cold expanse of space. At the last moment, a blinding flash of light erupted from one of the Solarian ships. A blast of energy tore through the surrounding void. The warriors' hearts froze in panic. "Hold steady," Riker barked as the warriors skillfully adjusted their ships to avoid detection. The flash had come from a distant sector, not from their immediate path, but it served as a warning. Nothing was certain. They pushed forward, through the breach, into the heart of the Solarian fleet. The warriors' ships slid through the shields, a few inches from being obliterated. Each warrior had a designated target, a crucial system on the command ships that would disable the fleet's ability to communicate. If they could sever the Solarian fleet's connection to each other, it would throw their entire attack into disarray. But as the warriors infiltrated the enemy ships, things didn't go according to plan. The aliens were more prepared than expected. A sudden pulse of energy swept through the area, temporarily disabling their cloaking systems. The warriors' ships flickered in and out of visibility. The Solarian fleet sensors suddenly began picking up the slight energy shifts. "Time to move," Riker commanded, his voice sharp and precise. "We can't afford to stay hidden any longer." The warriors switched to evasive maneuvers, activating the next phase of the plan. Their ships broke through the Solarian defenses, engaging in a fierce but strategic attack. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to change the course of the war. As Riker's ship zoomed through the hull of the Solarian command ship, he could see the damage they were causing. Sparks flew from alien control panels, alarms blared, and the once organized enemy fleet began to fracture. The warriors had done it. They had breached the heart of the Solarian fleet, and chaos was beginning to unfold. The Solarians were scrambling to regain control, but it was too late. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. Just as victory seemed within reach, Riker's ship shook violently. A direct hit from a Solarian defense turret sent shockwaves through the vessel. Riker's vision blurred for a moment, but he quickly regained control. The battle wasn't over yet. There was still much to do, and they hadn't even begun to face the full force of the Solarian military. "We're not out of the woods yet," Riker said, his voice tense but determined. "Stay sharp. We're just getting started." The warriors' hearts pounded as they moved deeper into the heart of the Solarian fleet. The chaos they had created was spreading like wildfire. Communications were disrupted, and some of the alien ships began drifting off course, disoriented. It was the moment they had worked for, the chance to strike back. But even in the midst of this chaos, Colonel Riker knew the war was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. Riker's ship cut through the air, heading toward the enemy's next target. He glanced at the screen, showing the layout of the Solarian command ship's interior. The plan was to infiltrate the main control room and sabotage the systems that managed the fleet's coordinated attack. But time was running out. The Solarians were beginning to recover, and their vast war machines were starting to recalibrate their defenses. "We've got 30 minutes before their shields are back online," Riker said into the comms. "We need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more time they have to regroup." The warriors responded with silent agreement. They knew that every moment mattered. But as they moved through the dark corridors of the alien ship, it became clear that the Solarians weren't going to make it easy. The alien architecture was strange. Twisting metallic walls that pulsed with an unnatural glow, corridors that seemed to curve and shift underfoot. It was unlike any human-made structure, a maze designed for confusion, meant to throw invaders off course. Yet, the warriors had trained for this. They were prepared. "Stay sharp," Riker said, leading his team deeper into the heart of the alien vessel. "We know where their power grid is, but we're going to have to disable it from the inside. Once we do, they'll be crippled, but we won't have much time before they start fighting back." As the warriors approached the power core, a loud thrum echoed through the ship, followed by the unsettling sound of footsteps. Alien, rhythmic, deliberate. Riker held up a hand, signaling the team to stop. The warriors dropped to a crouch, each of them blending into the shadows, their breathing slow and controlled. Their mission was critical, but one mistake could expose them all. Through the dim light of the corridor, the shadowy forms of Solarian soldiers appeared. They moved in perfect sync, their tall, armored bodies casting long shadows on the walls. They were too many to fight head-on without giving away their position. The warriors exchanged silent glances. Riker made a quick decision. "We take them out quietly," he whispered. The warriors nodded. They had practiced for this moment, and now it was time to show their skill. One by one, they moved, slipping silently from shadow to shadow. Each warrior used their advanced training to incapacitate the Solarian soldiers. No loud noises, no unnecessary movements. The soldiers fell one by one, incapacitated with swift, precise strikes. They had no chance to react. But just as the last soldier collapsed, an alarm blared. Red lights flashed throughout the ship. They had been spotted. "Move, now," Riker shouted, as the warriors sprinted toward the power core. The quiet infiltration was over. They had to get to the control room before the Solarians could respond. The warriors pushed through the corridors, now filled with urgency. They reached the central control room, a massive chamber with walls lined with alien technology. The Solarian leader, Zorak, would be watching from here, commanding the fleet, orchestrating the destruction of Earth. The warriors knew that taking this room would be the turning point in the battle. If they could disable the Solarians' command and control systems, they would create a massive hole in the enemy's strategy. But as they approached the control panel, the door slammed shut. They were trapped. An eerie, robotic voice echoed from the walls of the chamber. "You are intruders. You will not succeed." Riker cursed under his breath. The Solarians had anticipated this. They had set a trap. Suddenly, the walls began to move, shifting and expanding. Alien turrets emerged from the ceiling, locking onto the warriors. The room had turned into a deadly maze of shifting metal and weapons. The warriors immediately split up, each one taking a different path in the room. Their mission was still clear: get to the core, disable the systems, and escape. They had no time to fight these turrets directly, but they could outsmart them. They had to. Riker ran, diving behind a column as the turrets fired in rapid succession. The room lit up with bright bursts of energy, scorching the walls and floor where he had just been. His heart raced, but he remained focused. His team was counting on him. "On my mark, we move," Riker shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. 3, 2, 1, now. The warriors darted through the labyrinth, using their agility and the environment to stay out of the turret's line of fire. They were fast, moving like shadows, each step calculated and deliberate. They reached the central control panel, but just as Riker began to work on disabling it, the door to the chamber slammed open. Solarian reinforcements flooded in, soldiers, armed with weapons that crackled with deadly energy. They had been waiting for this moment. "Hold them off," Riker ordered as his team engaged the aliens. The battle had shifted into overdrive. The warriors fought fiercely, their weapons clashing with the Solarian forces. They were vastly outnumbered, but they were fighting for survival and for Earth. Despite the overwhelming odds, the warriors pushed forward, taking down Solarian soldiers one by one. They were exhausted, but they knew the fate of their planet rested on their shoulders. As Riker finally cracked the code on the control panel, the power grid of the Solarian fleet flickered, and their systems began to malfunction. The warriors had done it. Their strike had hit the heart of the alien attack. The fleet was destabilizing, and the tide of the battle was turning. But the war wasn't over yet. The Solarians would come for them. The fight for Earth had entered its most dangerous phase. The warriors had dealt a powerful blow, but now they had to escape the chaos they had unleashed. The Solarian fleet was already regrouping, and the warriors had to act fast before their luck ran out. The warriors stood amidst the wreckage of the Exalorian command center, breathing heavily, their bodies sore from the fierce battle. They had succeeded in disabling the core systems, but at a great cost. The alien fleet was in disarray, but the warriors knew their time was running out. The Exalorian reinforcements were already mobilizing, and the control room, once a hub of alien power, had become a battleground. "We don't have long," Riker muttered, his voice gritty from the fight. "The fleet's going to regroup, and they'll be coming for us. We need to get out of here now." He signaled to his team, and they began moving toward the exit, the walls of the command center still trembling from the previous explosions. The Exalorian forces were relentless, and though they had created a crack in the alien fleet's armor, the true test had only just begun. As they reached the exit doors, a loud crackling sound filled the air. Riker's eyes widened as he saw a wall of energy rise, sealing off their only escape route. The Exalorians had activated their last-ditch defense, an energy barrier that could only be broken by a full-scale assault from their most powerful weapons. "This is bad," one of the warriors, Sergeant Laura Ortiz, said, glancing at the barrier. "We're trapped." Riker clenched his fists, his mind working quickly. They were surrounded by enemy forces, and the barrier was impassable. Their stealth ships were far away, and without access to the central controls, they couldn't call for reinforcements, but giving up wasn't an option. "Stay focused," Riker ordered, turning to face the team. "We fight our way out of here. They're expecting us to be trapped, but they're not ready for us to fight back like this." The warriors immediately took position, using whatever cover they could find in the command center. The room had become an alien stronghold, and the Exalorians were closing in from all sides. It was time to go on the offensive. As the Exalorian forces advanced, the warriors sprang into action. They moved with precision, each one exploiting the weaknesses in the enemy's formation. Riker led the charge, his weapon flashing in the dim light as he cut through the alien soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Each warrior knew their role. Ortiz laid down cover fire, while Sergeant Victor Tran hacked into the Exalorian communication systems, causing confusion among their ranks. Meanwhile, Private Mia Sullivan planted explosives along the walls, setting traps for the approaching enemy. The Exalorians were not accustomed to such guerrilla tactics. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight with a ferocity that defied logic. Despite the overwhelming odds, the warriors began to make progress. The Exalorians' organized assault turned into a disjointed chaos as their forces struggled to deal with the unpredictable, highly skilled human warriors. "Push forward. We've got to get to the central reactor," Riker shouted over the comms, urging his team to move. The barrier might be impenetrable, but they knew that the Exalorians couldn't keep up the fight for much longer. If they could destroy the reactor, it would be a crippling blow to the fleet. The warriors moved deeper into the heart of the Exalorian ship, the air growing thick with tension. Every corner they turned, they were met with more resistance, but they never faltered. They had come too far to back down now. They had a mission to finish. As they approached the central reactor, the air seemed to crackle with energy. The walls were lined with pulsating lights, and the sound of the Exalorian engines hummed through the floors. Riker could feel the intensity of the moment, the weight of humanity's future pressing down on him. "We're almost there," he said, his voice low but determined. But just as they reached the reactor room, the ground trembled beneath them. A deafening roar shook the ship, followed by the sharp sound of metal screeching. The room before them was engulfed in a violent, shimmering wave of energy. "No, they've activated the self-destruct sequence," Riker yelled, realizing the Exalorians had set the ship to explode if their core was breached. "Get out of there. Now," Ortiz shouted, her eyes wide with panic. But Riker wasn't ready to give up. "We can't leave without completing the mission. We have to destroy the reactor now. If we don't, this whole fleet could fall back into line and come after Earth with full force. We can't let that happen. Ortiz and the others hesitated for a moment, but they knew what was at stake. This was their chance to truly cripple the Xalorian fleet. There was no turning back. Riker sprinted toward the reactor core, his hands flying over the control panel. Sparks erupted around him as he worked to override the alien security systems. The Xalorians were still coming, but the warriors fought with everything they had left, holding off the enemy long enough for Riker to complete the task. The countdown to the ship's destruction was ticking down faster. Seconds seemed to stretch into eternity. Riker's heart pounded as he slammed his hand on the final button, initiating the detonation sequence. The reactor began to hum, the air crackling with energy. The Xalorian ship was about to implode. "Time to go," Riker shouted, turning to his team. With the ship on the brink of collapse, they had no time to waste. They sprinted down the narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing in the chaos. The ship groaned, and the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The warriors didn't stop running. They couldn't afford to. As they reached the exit, the entire ship seemed to shudder. The force of the impending explosion shook the walls around them. The warriors didn't look back. They knew the battle wasn't over, but they had done what they came to do. The Xalorians would never underestimate humanity again. They leaped into their escape pods, the last remnants of the Xalorian fleet beginning to crumble behind them. As the pod shot toward Earth, Riker's thoughts raced. The war was far from finished, but this battle, this victory, had shown them something undeniable. Earth was not to be written off. It was time to prepare for the next fight. The warriors were ready. The escape pods hurtled through space, tearing away from the shattered remains of the Xalorian flagship. Inside, the warriors sat in tense silence, the weight of their victory settling heavily upon them. They had delivered a decisive blow to the alien fleet, but the war was far from over. Riker's mind raced as he stared at the flickering screens in front of him. Their mission had been a success, but the greater threat still loomed. As the pods drifted toward Earth, the warriors remained alert, each of them processing the events in their own way. Riker's fingers hovered over the controls, glancing over the status reports. The destruction of the Xalorian command ship had bought Earth some time, but the rest of the fleet wasn't far behind. The Xalorians would regroup. They always did. And when they did, humanity would be facing an even larger threat. How much longer until we hit Earth's atmosphere? Riker asked, his voice calm but firm. 20 minutes, Ortiz replied, her eyes scanning the external feeds. We've made it past their detection range for now. The warriors exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that the time they had bought was precious, but fleeting. Earth's defenses were strong, but they were not invincible. And the Xalorians weren't the type of enemies who simply gave up after one loss. Riker knew it would only be a matter of time before they came back with everything they had. Prepare for landing, Riker ordered, his voice resolute. We need to regroup with command. I want a full report on the status of our defenses. The Xalorians will be back, and we need to be ready. The pods descended through the atmosphere, the fiery trail behind them, lighting up the sky as they hurtled toward Earth. Below, the vast, sprawling landscape of their home planet awaited them. For a moment, the warriors allowed themselves to take in the sight. Earth was still standing, still free. But for how much longer? As they touched down in a secure military base, Riker led his team out of their pods, their boots hitting the cold ground with a dull thud. The base was buzzing with activity, officers and technicians running around, securing the area in anticipation of their return. The air was thick with urgency, and Riker felt it in his bones. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Colonel," a voice called out from behind. Riker turned to see General Harrison, the highest-ranking officer in the military, approaching quickly. His face was etched with worry, but also with something else. Resolve. "I've been briefed on the mission. You've done what no one thought possible." "We've barely scratched the surface," Riker replied, his tone grim. The Xalorians won't be stopped by one setback. They'll be back with more firepower, more troops. We need to prepare for the next phase. General Harrison nodded, his expression hardening. I agree. We've already begun reinforcing Earth's defenses, but we're going to need more than just technology. We need a strategy, one that puts us on the offensive. Riker's mind started to turn. The warriors had proven humanity's strength and ingenuity, but it wasn't enough to rely on brute force alone. They needed to outthink the Xalorians, find a way to hit them where it hurt, before they could regroup and retaliate. They needed to strike first, but it had to be done strategically, not impulsively. Have you received any intel on the Xalorian reinforcements? Riker asked. We've intercepted some of their transmissions, Harrison said. It's clear that they're preparing for a massive counterattack. They've already started gathering their fleet near the Oort cloud. The timing is critical. Riker's brow furrowed as he thought through their options. The Oort cloud was at the edge of the solar system, and it would take a while for the Xalorians to mobilize a large enough force to make an assault. But Riker knew better than to underestimate them. They had a technology far beyond Earth's, and they had been planning this invasion for centuries. We can't wait for them to come to us, Riker said. We need to take the fight to them. Are you suggesting we go to the Oort cloud? General Harrison asked, his voice skeptical but curious. Riker nodded. We don't have the luxury of time. If we wait for them to come here, they'll be ready. We need to disrupt their preparations before they can fully mobilize. We take the fight to their doorstep. It's the only way to keep Earth safe. There was a long pause as General Harrison considered the plan. The idea of sending Earth's warriors into the depths of space, into the very heart of enemy territory, was a bold move. But Riker knew they didn't have any other choice. This was their best shot at keeping the Xalorians from ever returning in full force. All right, Harrison finally said, his voice steady. You have my support. We'll get the resources you need to launch this operation, but you'll have to move quickly. Riker turned to his team, who had gathered nearby, listening to the conversation. Their faces were filled with the same determination they had shown throughout the mission. This would be their most dangerous assignment yet, but they were ready. We move out in 2 hours, Riker said, his voice commanding. Everyone get to your stations. We've got a fleet to stop, and we need to be prepared for anything. As his team dispersed, Riker took a deep breath. He knew the risks. But the war had already come to Earth, and it was clear the Xalorians would never stop until they had conquered it. The only way to ensure humanity's survival was to take the fight to the stars. They would strike hard, strike fast, and show the Xalorians that humanity was not to be underestimated. The warriors had already made their mark. Now, it was time to make sure the universe would never forget who Earth's mightiest warriors were. The plan was set, and the warriors had no time to waste. The military base hummed with activity as preparations for the next phase of their mission kicked into high gear. Riker stood at the center of the operation, watching his team gear up. Their faces were etched with determination, but beneath the hard exterior, he knew they all felt the weight of what was to come. As the hours ticked down, Riker found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From the initial alien attack to their miraculous success in infiltrating the Xalorian fleet, they had proven that humanity had the will and the courage to fight back. But this next step was different. They were no longer fighting in Earth's defense. They were about to take the fight to the Xalorian heart of operations. Everything's in place, Ortiz said, her voice firm as she adjusted her gear. We've got the ships ready. The weapons systems fully operational. We're as prepared as we can be. Riker nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The Oort cloud was a vast, cold region at the edge of the solar system. The Xalorians were already assembling their forces there, preparing for their next strike. If they let the Xalorians regroup and build their fleet, the cost would be even greater. They couldn't afford that. They had to stop them before they could assemble full strength. He turned to his team, meeting each of their eyes. We're going in, and we're going in hard. We don't know what we'll find out there, but we do know one thing. This is our chance. We hit them now, we hit them fast, and we hit them with everything we've got. We don't stop until they're completely crippled." Each warrior nodded, their resolve hardening. They understood the stakes. If this mission failed, it could mean the end of humanity. If they succeeded, they would deliver a blow so significant that the Xalorians would think twice before invading Earth again. The first phase of the mission was to launch from Earth's atmosphere and head toward the Oort cloud at full speed. They would approach the Xalorian fleet under the cover of their own stealth technology, using the vast distances of space to their advantage. They would take out the Xalorian command ships first, preventing any large-scale coordination, then move on to disable their weapon systems. "Let's move out," Riker ordered, his voice steady. His heart raced as he walked toward the ship that would carry them to their enemy. The warriors climbed into their ships, securing their harnesses and preparing for launch. As the engines roared to life and they lifted off the ground, Riker's mind went over the plan once again. Their success depended on timing, getting in and out without alerting the entire fleet to their presence. They had no backup. Failure wasn't an option. The silence of space surrounded them as they flew deeper into the darkness. The Oort cloud loomed ahead, an empty, mysterious region of icy comets and debris, perfect for an ambush. As they crossed the boundary, the first signs of the Xalorian fleet began to appear on the scanners. Riker's breath hitched. They were out there, waiting, preparing for something they couldn't yet understand. "Engage stealth mode," Riker ordered, his voice cutting through the comms. "We're not going to give them any chance to detect us." The ship's cloaking technology kicked in, and the warriors disappeared from all but the most sensitive scanners. They were invisible, ghost-like, floating through the darkened expanse. The tension among the team was palpable. Every member of the crew knew that if they were detected now, they'd be facing a battle they couldn't win. The vastness of space seemed to stretch endlessly before them, but Riker's eyes remained locked on the scanners, tracking the movement of the enemy fleet. The Xalorians were slow to realize they were under attack. For now, the warriors had the element of surprise. But the silence was shattered by a sudden burst of energy. Bright, flashing signals of the Xalorian fleet suddenly coming to life. They had spotted something. Riker's heart pounded as he analyzed the data. The enemy wasn't acting in the disorganized panic he had expected. Instead, their ships seemed to synchronize, as though they were aware of the human threat and had already planned for it. "They're aware of us," Riker said, his voice tight. "They've adapted faster than we thought." Ortiz cursed under her breath. "They've got the tech to detect our cloaking. We won't have much longer." "We push forward," Riker said, locking eyes with his team. "We hit them hard. We'll need to act faster." The warriors increased their speed, hurtling toward the Xalorian flagship at breakneck pace. Riker gripped the controls with determination, every nerve in his body alive with the adrenaline of the approaching battle. Suddenly, a hail of enemy fire shot past their ships, narrowly missing them. The Xalorians weren't holding back anymore. They were preparing for the full-scale confrontation that had been inevitable. Riker's fingers danced across the controls, launching countermeasures and sending his ship into evasive maneuvers. "Get to the command ship," Riker yelled, adrenaline pumping. "Take out their shields. We need to take down their ability to respond before they can counterattack." The warriors followed his orders, their ships darting through the Xalorian defenses, striking their targets with precision. Explosions erupted across the enemy fleet, and the warriors could hear the frantic chatter of the alien crews as their systems began to fail. "Targeting their main reactor," Ortiz said, as she fired another volley of plasma shots. The Xalorian flagship's shields flickered, and for a moment, it seemed like the invaders might finally be overwhelmed. But just as the warriors prepared to finish the job, a massive shockwave sent their ships tumbling through space. The Xalorians had activated their backup systems, desperate but powerful. The battle raged on, the warriors outnumbered but determined. The odds were stacked against them, but they kept fighting. They were proving something to the Xalorians, that Earth's mightiest warriors would never bow down. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future, for a world they refused to let fall under the aliens' cruel grip. Despite the overwhelming odds, the warriors pressed on, never backing down. With each blow they struck against the Xalorian fleet, they reminded their enemies that Earth had more strength than they could have ever imagined.